He had stopped believing in small moments. Life had turned into a routine he followed without thinking. Wake up early. Get dressed in silence. Drink tea that had lost its taste. Walk the same roads. Sit at the same desk. He wasn't angry or broken loudly. He was just tired in a quiet way that no one noticed. The kind of tired that lives inside your chest and makes everything feel heavy, even when nothing bad is happening at that moment. A few years ago, he had trusted someone with his whole heart. He had believed every promise. He had pictured a future that felt warm and safe. But that future had slowly fallen apart. Not with a big fight, not with screaming or drama, but with silence. With unanswered calls, with excuses, with the slow feeling of being left behind. Since then, he had stopped expecting anything from anyone. On this particular evening, the sky was dark, even though it wasn't very late. Clouds gathered quickly, and the air smelled like rain. He had stayed back at the office longer than usual that day. He didn't like going home early. Home felt too quiet. Work gave him a reason to stay busy and forget the noise inside his mind. When he finally stepped outside, the first raindrops hit the ground. He pulled his jacket tighter and started walking toward the bus stop. His phone buzzed in his hand as he checked the time. He was tired, hungry, and not in the mood to deal with the rain. As he walked faster, trying to avoid getting soaked, he didn't notice the uneven patch of road covered in muddy water. His foot slipped. For a moment, everything felt slow. His phone flew from his hand. The papers he was carrying scattered across the wet ground. He let out a low sigh, feeling embarrassed even though no one was standing close enough to laugh. He crouched down, trying to save his papers from getting completely wet. Water soaked through the thin cover of his file, and raindrops hit the back of his neck. That's when he heard a soft voice. "Here, take this." He looked up and saw her standing there, holding a small umbrella over both of them. She was slightly shorter than him, wearing a simple dress and a light scarf that was already getting wet at the edges. Her eyes weren't curious or judgmental. They were kind, calm, real. She handed him a clean handkerchief. "You dropped your phone too," she said gently, pointing toward the puddle. He felt awkward accepting help. He wasn't used to it. For years he had handled everything alone. "Thank you," he said quietly, picking up his phone and quickly wiping it. Together, they gathered his scattered papers. She didn't complain about the rain. She didn't act like she was in a hurry. She just helped, as if this small act of kindness was the most natural thing in the world. The rain grew a little heavier. People rushed past them, some without even looking, some holding their bags tightly to their chests. The streetlights flickered on, creating yellow reflections on the wet road. "You should stand under the bus shelter," she said. He nodded, not knowing what else to say. They walked the short distance together, staying under the tiny umbrella that barely covered them. For a few seconds, he became strangely aware of how close they were standing, but it didn't make him uncomfortable. It made him feel safe in a way he hadn't felt in years. At the shelter, they stopped. "You okay?" she asked. He gave a small nod. "Yeah, just not very lucky with rain, I guess." She smiled. It wasn't a loud or forced smile. It was simple and warm. "I think rain just shows who still notices other people," she said softly. Those words stayed with him. They stood there in silence for a few moments. Listening to the sound of rain hitting the metal roof, the world felt slower in that tiny space. He noticed how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. He noticed how her hands were slightly cold from holding the umbrella. He didn't want to ask for her name. It felt too fast, too personal, and at the same time, he didn't want her to leave. "Do you come here often?" he asked, trying to keep his voice normal. She nodded. "Every day. At the same time. Same bus." He gave a small laugh. Same. That simple word felt strange between two strangers. The bus lights appeared in the distance. "That's mine," she said. She handed him the umbrella for a second and folded her handkerchief back into her bag. "Keep it," she said about the handkerchief. "Your papers are still damp." He didn't know what to say. "Thank you," he repeated, but this time it felt heavier. It's more real. She stepped onto the bus, turned once more, and gave him a small wave. The doors closed. The bus moved away, leaving behind a trail of light and water. He stood there longer than he needed to. When he looked down at the handkerchief, he noticed a light floral scent, something soft and comforting. It reminded him of something he couldn't explain. Home, maybe, or peace. That night, when he finally reached home, he placed the handkerchief carefully on his table instead of tossing it aside. He didn't understand why a small moment on a rainy road felt so important, but deep inside, something had shifted. For the first time in a long time. He didn't feel completely alone in the world, and somewhere in the quiet of his room, with the sound of distant thunder outside the window, he found himself hoping just a little that he might see her again. He couldn't stop thinking about that rainy evening. The small act of kindness had stayed with him in a way he hadn't expected. The handkerchief on his table seemed to carry a quiet warmth, a reminder that someone had noticed him when he had felt invisible. He tried to go back to his usual routine, but something inside him was different. Even the streets felt softer, the air felt lighter, and the little things he usually ignored seemed to matter a little more. The next day, he found himself at the same bus stop, hoping, though he wouldn't admit it even to himself, that he might see her again. Time passed slowly, and buses came and went, carrying people who never noticed the small drops of rain clinging to their hair or clothes. He almost gave up when finally he saw her stepping off the sidewalk with her usual calm demeanor. She was smiling at something on her phone, completely unaware of him standing there like a fool. When she looked up and saw him, her expression didn't show surprise or judgment. It was simple, kind, and unassuming. Double quotes, hey. Trying to sound casual, even though his chest felt tight. From that day on, meeting her became a quiet routine. They would walk together for a few blocks in the mornings, share small conversations, and then part ways when their buses arrived. At first, the conversations were about trivial things, the weather, a book she was reading, the latest news. But slowly the small talk became deeper. They began to share little details about their lives that they hadn't told anyone else. She told him about her work at a small local organization, helping people who often felt invisible themselves. She spoke about the struggles she had faced growing up, about moments of sadness and uncertainty, and about the small victories she cherished. Her words were calm and unhurried, but they carried a depth he hadn't expected. He, in turn, spoke carefully at first. He didn't want to burden her with the heaviness he carried, but her gentle attention made him open up. He told her about his past, about the heartbreak that had made him cautious and distant. He told her about the quiet life he had built around routines, and how, despite everything, he had begun to feel a small flicker of hope that maybe life could be lighter. They laughed together sometimes. Not loudly, but in that quiet, shared way that made the world feel smaller and safer. He noticed how easily she listened, how her attention didn't drift even when the street was crowded or the bus was coming. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't rush. She just listened, and in that act, began to feel something he hadn't felt in years, understood. Over the next few weeks, their walks became longer. They discovered shared interests, old films, small cafes tucked in quiet streets, music that carried memories without words. They started meeting intentionally outside of the bus stop, sometimes for a coffee, sometimes just to walk without any real destination. He learned that she had a favorite park where she liked to sit on a bench in the evening and watch the world go by. He began joining her there silently, just to share that space. There was no rush, no pressure, no need to define anything. It was simple, and that simplicity made it feel rare and precious. He realized that what they were building was different from anything he had known. It wasn't love at first sight, fiery and overwhelming. It was something quieter, slower, and perhaps even stronger because of it. One evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, they sat on her favorite bench. The air smelled faintly of grass and wet earth from a brief afternoon drizzle. They were silent for a while, just watching the sky change color, you know, she said finally. I like these quiet moments more than anything else. It's like the world slows down just for a little while, and we can notice what really matters. He nodded. I know what you mean. It's rare to find moments like this. Her smile was small but genuine. I feel like some people never get to notice these moments. They rush past everything. He felt a quiet understanding. He had been one of those people once. Always rushing, always distracted, always thinking about what came next. But with her, the world seemed different. It wasn't that the streets or the benches or the trees had changed. It was him. He was starting to notice, starting to feel, starting to hope. As the days passed, their connection grew. He began to look forward to their talks, their walks, their quiet moments together. He caught himself thinking about her, even when she wasn't around. He remembered the curve of her smile, the way her hair fell softly across her shoulder, the calm way she listened. It was subtle, but it was constant. She too began to share more of herself. She told him about her dreams, small ones at first, like visiting a new bookstore or learning to cook a particular dish. Then, slowly, bigger dreams crept in, traveling to places she had only read about, creating something meaningful in her work, finding someone who could see her as she saw the world. He didn't feel pressured or scared. He felt inspired. Being around her made him want to be better. Not in a showy way, but in a real, quiet way. He wanted to notice the small things, to care more, to listen more. He realized that love wasn't just about feeling good or being happy. It was about choosing to show up. Even when it was ordinary, even when it was quiet, even when no one else was watching. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves sharing another umbrella, walking through puddles and laughing softly as they tried not to slip. He had never realized how comforting it could be to simply walk with someone, to share silence, to share small jokes, to share presence. She laughed at how clumsy he was stepping over puddles, and he laughed at her gentle teasing. For the first time in years, he felt a lightness he hadn't known he had lost. That evening, they sat in a small cafe, steaming cups of tea in their hands. He watched her carefully, noticing the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she loved. He noticed the way she sipped her tea, the way she tilted her head slightly when she thought about her words. These small details seemed ordinary, but to him, they felt extraordinary, he said quietly, almost to himself. I never expected to meet someone like this. She looked at him, curious. Like what? Someone who makes ordinary things feel important. Someone who makes silence feel like company. She smiled softly, a little shy. I feel the same way. That was the moment he realized that what was happening between them wasn't just coincidence or chance. It was something fragile, something rare, something that needed care and patience. And yet it was natural. It didn't need force or drama. It just was. Over the next few weeks, their friendship became their sanctuary. They met not because they needed something from each other, but because they wanted to share moments of life together. They shared worries, hopes, fears, and small victories. They encouraged each other in quiet ways, a word of praise, a shared laugh, a small gesture of thoughtfulness. They discovered that real connection didn't require grand declarations. It thrived in the ordinary, in the repeated presence of someone who truly cared. He began to notice a change in himself. He was calmer, more patient, more willing to pause and see the world around him. He had started to feel again, in places he hadn't felt for years. He noticed sunsets, the smell of wet streets, the way the light hit the corner of a cafe window. And every time he shared those moments with her, they became more meaningful, more alive. For her, too, life seemed lighter. She had been cautious, protective of her heart, careful not to trust easily. But with him, she felt safe. She could be herself without masks or pretenses. She could share her quiet joys and hidden fears without fear of judgment. And in that safety, something gentle and strong began to grow. By the end of the month, they weren't just friends anymore. There was an unspoken understanding, a quiet bond that didn't need words. He would notice when she looked tired, and she would notice when he seemed lost in thought. They would offer small comforts, a cup of tea, a warm word, a hand to hold during moments of uncertainty. And yet, there was no rush, no expectation, no pressure. They were building something slowly, carefully, with the kind of patience that only comes from understanding the value of quiet connection. They didn't speak of love in loud or dramatic terms. They simply showed up for each other, day after day, moment after moment, learning that true connection was not about fireworks or grand gestures, but about presence, care, and trust. And in that presence, in those shared moments of ordinary life made extraordinary, both of them began to feel a quiet certainty that whatever was growing between them, it was real, it was rare, and it was worth holding on to. They didn't know where this would lead. They didn't know the challenges that lay ahead or the doubts that would come. But for the first time in a long time, they were willing to find out together. And that willingness, simple and unspoken, was the beginning of something neither of them had expected, but both of them quietly hoped for, a bond that could heal, sustain, and perhaps in time, grow into something beautiful. He had never imagined that life could feel so light, yet so complicated at the same time. Their friendship had grown quietly, beautifully, and it had begun to fill spaces in him he didn't know were empty. But life has a way of testing even the most delicate moments, and he was about to face something that neither of them had anticipated. It started with a call he had been dreading but couldn't avoid. His company had offered him a new position, one that promised growth, money, and a future he had always thought about. It was in another city, far from the familiar streets, far from the bus stop, far from her. At first, he had been excited. This was the kind of opportunity he had worked for, the kind of success he had chased before he had lost himself in disappointment. But then reality hit. The thought of leaving her, leaving their quiet routine, their shared moments, filled him with a strange, heavy ache. He didn't tell her immediately. He couldn't. The news felt too big, too abrupt, and he wasn't ready to explain how much it scared him. He spent nights pacing his small apartment, thinking about what he wanted. Did he want the promotion more than the warmth of her presence? Could he really walk away from someone who had slowly, patiently made him feel alive again? Meanwhile, she noticed a subtle change in him. He was quieter, more distracted, his smile smaller. She tried to ask, tried to bring it up casually, but he brushed her off with a small joke or a distracted nod. She didn't push. She had learned over the weeks that patience often mattered more than words. But inside, she felt a growing worry, sensed that something significant was happening that she might not be a part of. The distance started slowly at first. He would respond to her messages hours later instead of immediately. Calls became shorter, filled with pauses, with unsaid words. They would still meet, but the spark of their easy connection felt dimmed, like a candle flickering in the wind. She didn't complain, didn't question, but she noticed. And she felt it deeply, that quiet tension that neither of them could yet name. One evening, he walked with her as usual, but the silence between them was heavier than the falling dusk around them. The streetlights were on, casting long shadows across the sidewalk, and for the first time, he felt afraid of being honest. Afraid that if he said the wrong thing, he might lose her entirely. "I got an offer," he said finally, his voice low. She stopped mid-step, looking at him. Her brow furrowed, but she didn't say anything immediately. She waited for him to continue. "It's in another city," he admitted. "It's a big opportunity, but it means leaving here, leaving everything." She nodded slowly, trying to mask the wave of emotion rising in her chest. She wanted to tell him not to go, to stay, to fight against whatever pressure was pushing him away. But she also understood that life sometimes demanded difficult choices, and that pushing too hard could break something fragile. "When do you have to decide?" she asked softly. "Soon," he said. "Maybe by the end of the week." They walked in silence after that, the rain starting to drizzle again, soft and hesitant, like the unspoken feelings between them. He wanted to reach for her hand, to tell her that he didn't want to leave, that he wanted her in his life no matter where he was. But he was afraid. Afraid that expressing it would make it real. Afraid that reality might not cooperate. Days passed, and the distance grew more noticeable. He called less often, his messages shorter. She replied with care, but she couldn't hide the hurt, the worry, the growing fear that he was slipping away. He tried to convince himself that it was temporary, that he could handle the separation. But every night, he lay awake thinking about her, wondering if she was thinking about him too. She, on the other hand, tried to maintain her calm. She threw herself into small projects, into helping others, into routines that gave her structure. But every quiet moment reminded her of him, the way he laughed, the way he noticed the smallest details, the way he had slowly become a constant presence in her life. She missed him. She didn't just miss his company. She missed the way he had made ordinary life feel extraordinary. One evening, she decided to visit the small park they often went to, sitting on the same bench they had discovered together. She hoped the familiar space would bring her comfort, even if he wasn't there. She watched the sun sink below the horizon, the colors of the sky fading into soft purples and grays. The world felt vast, and yet empty without him. She thought about the words they hadn't said, the small gestures left unshared, the smiles that had dimmed over the past few days. He, meanwhile, sat in his apartment, staring at the window. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked glass. He felt a quiet panic growing inside him. He realized that the opportunity he had been excited about now felt hollow. The thought of leaving her, of breaking the fragile rhythm they had built, was unbearable. But he also felt trapped between desire and duty, between dreams and the unexpected pull of his heart. That night, sleep evaded both of them. Thoughts of what might happen, what could be lost, and what might remain kept them awake. They each questioned whether they were strong enough to face the changes, whether their bond could survive the challenge of distance, whether the small, quiet love they had nurtured could withstand the uncertainty looming over them. The next day, when he finally messaged her, it was short, careful. She read the words and felt her chest tighten. They spoke for a while, their conversation polite, careful, filled with pauses and hesitations. Neither of them wanted to say too much, yet neither could stay completely silent. Over the following week, the tension grew. Every interaction felt fragile, every shared glance heavy with unspoken fears. They met as usual at the bus stop, but instead of laughter and small jokes, there were silences, small awkward shifts, and glances toward the ground. Each moment together was filled with what wasn't said, the weight of decisions waiting to be made. He tried to imagine leaving her behind. It felt impossible. The thought made his stomach churn, made his chest ache, made his heart race in a way that surprised him. He realized that no promotion, no city, no opportunity could replace the connection they shared. Yet, he also felt the pressure of the decision looming, the responsibility of his own future tugging at him insistently. She noticed his inner struggle, even if he tried to hide it. She could read him too well now, the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes avoided hers when he was struggling to make sense of something. She wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, to say, "It's okay, we'll figure this out." But she held back, not wanting to push or seem desperate. She trusted him to come to his own realization. Even if it took time, then came the day when he had to leave temporarily for an interview in the new city. He didn't tell her he was leaving the night before. He just left a note on her favorite cafe table, a small card with careful words that tried to explain his confusion without alarming her too much. She found the note in the morning, her hands trembling slightly as she read it. His words were honest, apologetic, and filled with the uncertainty he couldn't voice in person. She felt a mix of hurt, worry, and hope. Hurt that he hadn't told her directly, worry about what the separation would do to their fragile bond, and hope that maybe, just maybe, he would return with clarity. During the days he was away, their communication was limited to brief messages and quick calls. The distance felt enormous. She missed the small touches, the shared silences, the comfort of just being near him. He felt it too, a gnawing emptiness he couldn't escape. A constant reminder that life was more than ambition. That connection mattered more than opportunity. In the evenings, he would walk the streets of the new city, trying to imagine her beside him, trying to feel her presence through the quiet of his apartment. He realized that work, opportunity, and success meant nothing if it couldn't be shared with the person who mattered most. She, Meanwhile, sat in the park where they had spent hours together. Staring at the same bench, imagining him there, she thought about the small moments they had shared. The laughter, the quiet conversations, the gentle understanding that had grown between them. And in the quiet of her heart, she made a decision that she would wait, that she would hold on to the bond they had nurtured, and that she would trust that if it was meant to be, he would find his way back. By the end of his trip, he knew what he had to do. The opportunity in the new city could not outweigh the connection he had with her. He realized that love, quiet and unassuming as it was, mattered more than ambition or fear of change. He wanted to be where he felt alive, where he felt seen, where he felt understood. And that place, he realized, was with her. The challenge had tested them both. The distance had created doubt, fear, and uncertainty. But it had also clarified something deeper, that what they shared was real, rare, and worth fighting for. And while neither of them knew exactly how the next step would unfold, both carried a quiet, unshakable certainty that they could face whatever came next together. The city felt colder than usual that evening. The wind cut through the streets, carrying the faint scent of rain from earlier in the day. He had returned without warning, his bag slung over one shoulder, and a nervous energy he could not shake. He didn't know exactly why he had chosen this moment, only that he could no longer bear the silence or the distance that had grown between them. Something inside him demanded he see her, not through messages, not through phone calls, but in person. He walked the familiar streets, his steps uncertain, despite having traveled them countless times. The small cafe where they had spent hours together in quiet companionship was just ahead. He paused for a moment outside, letting himself take in the sight. The windows glowed softly, the signs swinging lightly in the evening breeze. Every detail felt like it belonged to a memory he had been holding on to, one that refused to fade despite the days of distance and doubt. When he stepped inside, he scanned the room. And there she was. She looked up from her book just as she had every other time. Yet something was different. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, and then a small, cautious smile formed. She hadn't expected him, and in that moment, he understood how much he had missed the simple presence of her gaze. The reassurance it carried, the warmth it offered without words. "Hey," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Hey," she replied softly. Closing her book, her hands rested on it as if it could shield her from the sudden shock of his presence. For a few moments, neither spoke. The cafe around them was alive with low chatter, the clinking of cups, and the smell of coffee. But in their corner, time seemed to pause. The months of doubt, fear, and separation hung quietly between them, and he felt the weight of every unspoken word. "I had to see you," he said finally, his voice trembling slightly. "I couldn't wait any longer. I tried to handle it with distance, with excuses, with logic, but none of it worked. None of it mattered if I wasn't here, with you." Her eyes glistened. She wanted to look away, to mask the sudden flood of emotions, but she couldn't. "I've been waiting," she admitted. "I tried to stay calm, to trust you, to give you space. But it was hard. Every day, I wondered if you'd come back, if you even cared as much as I did." He reached out slowly, almost hesitantly, and she didn't pull back. Their hands met, tentative at first, searching, then finding comfort. The contact was simple, ordinary, yet it carried a promise stronger than any words they had spoken before. "I do care," he said. "I care more than I can explain." And I realized. The opportunity, the city, the plans. None of it matters if you're not part of it. You matter. You've mattered since the first moment you held that umbrella for me in the rain. Her lips trembled as she smiled, a mixture of relief, happiness, and lingering fear. "I never stopped caring either. I thought maybe you had already moved on, that maybe I wasn't enough to make you stay." "You're more than enough," he said. "You're everything I've been missing without even knowing it. I don't want to live in a world where we're apart. I can't." The cafe seemed to grow quieter around them as they shared that moment. Words no longer needed to fill the space. Silence became their conversation, the shared breathing, the warmth of their hands, the understanding in their eyes. They didn't rush. There was no need. Every hesitation, every fear, every unspoken thought had led them to this very point. And now it was theirs to cherish. He sat down across from her, holding her hands in his. "I don't have all the answers," he admitted. "I don't know what the future will bring, and I don't know if it will always be easy. But I know that I want you in it. I want us to try to face everything together, to be honest with each other, even when it's hard." She nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "I want that too. I want to try no matter what. I trust you. I've always trusted you, even when I felt unsure." For the next hour, they spoke quietly, sharing everything that had been left unsaid over the past weeks. They spoke of the fears that distance had created, the doubts that had threatened to pull them apart, the longing that had grown in silence. Each word built a bridge over the uncertainty. Each confession weaving them closer together. He told her about the nights he had spent walking the streets of the new city, imagining her beside him, feeling the emptiness of her absence. Realizing that nothing in the world could replace the comfort of her presence, she shared the moments she had spent in the park, waiting, hoping, imagining him returning, and the small acts she had done to distract herself while she held on to the hope that he would. Every story, every memory, every quiet moment of honesty deepened their bond. They realized that their connection wasn't fragile. It had been tested, strained, and stretched, yet it had survived. The challenges had shown them what mattered most, and now, with the truth laid bare between them, they could move forward with clarity and intention. When they finally stepped outside, the night air was cool and calm. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement, creating a shimmering path ahead. He didn't let go of her hand. She didn't pull away. Together, they walked, side by side, through the quiet streets. At a small bridge overlooking a narrow canal, they paused. The water reflected the lights and stars above, rippling gently in the breeze. He turned to her, taking a deep breath. "I know we can't promise a perfect future," he said, "but I can promise honesty. I can promise effort. I can promise that I will choose you every single day, even when it's hard." She smiled, a mixture of joy and quiet relief. "And I promise the same," she said. "I don't need perfect. I just need you. I just need us to try, together." In that moment, the world around them seemed to hold its breath. The fears, the doubts, the distance, the uncertainty, all of it melted away in the quiet understanding that they had found each other again. The bond they had nurtured through months of small moments, shared silences, and growing trust had brought them to a place of clarity. They walked back slowly, hand in hand, speaking softly about small things, the lights in the city, the quiet hum of life around them, the way the night felt calm after days of tension. There was no rush, no grand gestures, no need to prove anything. The truth of their feelings was enough. That night, when they finally parted, there was no fear in their hearts. Only a quiet certainty, a deep trust, on a shared understanding that they had weathered the storm together and had come out stronger. The distance, the doubts, the unspoken questions had all served to show them what really mattered. He walked home with a lightness he hadn't felt in months. She went to her apartment, feeling the same warmth. A quiet joy that came from knowing that someone truly cared for her, understood her, and wanted to face life alongside her. And in the weeks that followed, their connection grew even stronger. They didn't need dramatic declarations or loud gestures. Their love was built in small, deliberate acts, a hand held at the right moment, a shared smile across a busy street, a quiet conversation over tea. It was a love rooted in honesty, patience, and the willingness to be present. Even when life was messy and unpredictable, through that moment of truth, they had learned the most important lesson. Love isn't about rushing to the finish line. It isn't about grand promises or perfect timing. It's about showing up. Day after day, choosing each other, trusting each other, and facing everything together. They had been tested, and they had found that what they shared was real, enduring, and worth every effort. And as they continued to walk side by side through life's unpredictable paths, both knew with quiet certainty that they had found something rare and beautiful, a love that could heal, sustain, and grow. He had never imagined that love could feel so calm and strong at the same time. After all the doubts, the distance, and the moments of fear, they had finally found a place where honesty and trust were enough. Their connection no longer depended on chance or coincidence. It was deliberate, nurtured carefully, and treasured deeply. They had learned that real love was not about rushing, not about grand gestures or loud promises. It was about presence, patience, and choosing each other every single day. The mornings became their quiet sanctuary. They would meet for coffee at the small cafe, where it had all felt real again. The place where words and silences had finally found a balance. Sometimes they spoke about simple things, the weather, a book she had read, or the new route he had taken to work. Other times they shared more, opening their hearts without fear, letting the conversation drift naturally from memories to dreams. Each story, each laugh, each small confession deepened the bond. They had built with patience and care. He noticed the little things about her more than ever. The way her eyes lit up when she discovered something new in the city. The way she paused to listen to birds in the early morning. The way her hands moved as she spoke about something she loved. It wasn't just admiration. It was a quiet awareness of the life and warmth she brought into every space she entered. And she noticed him too, the subtle way he would check if she was comfortable, the way he listened without distraction, the way he seemed to hold a part of the world with him wherever he went. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were moments of tension, small misunderstandings, and challenges they hadn't anticipated. Yet every time a difficulty arose, they faced it together. They had learned the power of communication, of speaking honestly, even when it was hard, of admitting mistakes without fear of judgment. Each challenge became a step forward rather than a setback. One rainy afternoon, reminiscent of the day they first met, he walked with her along the familiar streets. The rain was light, misty, and soft, just enough to make the air feel fresh. He carried an umbrella, and she matched his pace, laughing softly as he tried to shield them both from the drizzle. He realized in that simple shared moment how much ordinary life could feel extraordinary with the right person beside you. The sound of the rain, the smell of wet earth, the quiet rhythm of their steps, it was ordinary. Yet it carried the weight of everything they had been through, together. They found themselves at the small park, where so many of their conversations had begun. The bench where they had spent hours sharing dreams and fears was waiting, as if it had known they would return. They sat down, the world around them quiet and calm. He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the same honesty and warmth he felt inside. "I never thought we'd get here," he said softly. "After all the doubts, the distance, and the fears it feels like we've found something real," she smiled, reaching out to hold his hand. "It's real because we made it real," she said. "Not because everything was easy, but because we chose to stay, to trust, to care." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and grass. They didn't need to speak for a while. The silence was comfortable, filled with understanding, presence, and the quiet joy of being together. It was in moments like these that they realized love didn't have to be dramatic to be profound. He thought about the journey they had taken, from that rainy day when their paths first crossed, to the weeks of laughter, shared stories, and slow-growing trust, to the painful days of distance and doubt. Each moment, he realized, had been necessary. It had taught them patience, resilience, and the value of honesty. And now, sitting beside her, he felt a quiet certainty that their love was strong enough to endure whatever life might bring. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Do you think this is what love is?" she asked quietly. He smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. "I think this is love," he said. "Not the kind that bursts loudly, but the kind that grows quietly, steadily, and stays. The kind that doesn't need to be perfect to be real." They spent the afternoon walking slowly through the park, talking about dreams for the future, small and big. He shared ideas about a project he wanted to start at work, one that could make a difference in the community. She spoke of a trip she had always wanted to take, a place she had read about in a book and longed to see in reality. They planned without pressure, imagining a future together with hope rather than expectation. Evenings became their time to unwind and reflect. They would cook simple meals together, sharing the small rituals of life that made ordinary days feel special. Sometimes they would sit on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker, speaking in whispers, or simply enjoying the quiet presence of each other. The comfort of these routines, the joy in the small acts of care, became the foundation of their love. There were moments when they were tested again, disagreements, miscommunications, moments of insecurity. But each time they approached the challenge with patience, not anger. They had learned that love was not about avoiding conflict, but facing it together with honesty and care. They learned to listen, to apologize when needed, and to forgive. Each resolution, no matter how small, strengthened their bond. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky with soft oranges and purples, he turned to her and took both her hands in his. "I want you to know something," he said. "I don't need a perfect life. I don't need everything to go exactly right. I just need you. I want to face every day with you, through the good and the bad. I want to choose you always." Tears filled her eyes, and she smiled, leaning into him. "I feel the same," she said. "I want to choose you every day. And I know we can face anything together because we already have." The months continued to pass, each day filled with shared laughter, quiet moments, small gestures of care, and mutual support. They learned more about each other, discovering strengths and vulnerabilities, and embracing them without judgment. They built a life that was not perfect, but one that was meaningful, warm, and real. Through it all, they realized that love was not about grand declarations or dramatic moments. It was about showing up, being present, and choosing each other, even in ordinary moments. It was about building trust, facing fears together, and nurturing the bond with patience and understanding. They had learned that love could be simple, quiet, and extraordinary all at once. On a quiet night, they walked home together, the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement. They didn't need words to fill the silence. Their hands were intertwined, their steps in sync, their hearts quietly certain. The journey had not been easy, but it had been real. And in that reality, they had found something rare and beautiful, a love that healed, sustained, and inspired. And as they reached the doorstep of her apartment, neither wanted the night to end. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, and she smiled, the warmth in her eyes reflecting everything they had been through. "I love you," he said softly, and there was no hesitation, no fear. "I love you too," she replied, her voice steady and sure. In that moment, they knew that their love was not just a fleeting feeling, but a choice, a commitment, and a quiet miracle. They had found each other, and they had found themselves in the process. Together, they had restored faith in the idea that real love exists, a love that is patient, enduring, and profoundly human. They didn't know what the future held, but they were ready to face it together. And in the simplicity of their shared presence, they understood that this was everything, a love that could grow quietly, heal gently, and last forever. Even after months of building their quiet, steady bond, life continued to test them in ways they had never expected. The world didn't pause because they had found each other. Responsibilities, work, family matters, and unexpected challenges kept rolling in. And sometimes it felt like the calm they had worked so hard to create was fragile, almost as if a single gust of wind could undo everything. Yet every time they faced difficulty, they discovered a deeper layer of trust and resilience that neither of them had anticipated. One morning, he woke to an urgent call from work. A project he had been managing for months had suddenly run into complications. Deadlines were moving up, and decisions needed to be made quickly. Normally, this would have stressed him out completely, leaving him short-tempered and exhausted. But now, with her presence quietly woven into his life, he felt different. He felt a steadiness, a calm that allowed him to think clearly and act decisively. When he returned home that evening, exhausted from hours of problem-solving, she was waiting for him. She had prepared a simple meal, just enough to warm them both. and her smile greeted him at the door. "You look tired," she said softly. "I am," he admitted, dropping his bag near the entrance. "But seeing you makes it a little better." She reached for his hand, pulling him gently toward the small table. "Let's eat. Talk later. Right now, just this." They sat down together, the clinking of cutlery and the aroma of food filling the quiet space. They didn't speak much at first. They didn't need to. The act of being together, of sharing a meal after a long day, was comforting enough. Sometimes the simplest things are the most powerful. As he ate, he reflected on how different his life had become. Just months ago, he would have come home to an empty apartment. Staring at four walls, replaying problems over and over in his mind. Now, he had someone beside him, someone who offered not advice, but support. Not judgment, but understanding. She didn't try to fix everything for him. She simply let him be, and in that quiet patience, she gave him more than he had realized he needed. The next few weeks brought more challenges. A family member fell ill, requiring attention and care. Work demands intensified again, and once more, the fear of losing balance crept in. But they faced these pressures together. She accompanied him to appointments, offered a listening ear when he needed to vent, and reminded him gently when he was being too hard on himself. He, in turn, supported her in small ways, helping her manage her own tasks, offering reassurance, and making time for moments of shared laughter, even in the middle of stressful days. Through it all, they learned that love is not about grand gestures or dramatic displays. It is about showing up consistently through ordinary and difficult days alike. It is in the little acts of kindness, the willingness to listen, the patience to understand, and the quiet commitment to stay. One rainy evening, reminiscent of the day they first met, they decided to walk through the streets together. The city was wet, reflective, and calm. The air smelled of rain and damp earth, and the glow of streetlights mirrored in puddles created a soft, golden path. They walked slowly, hands intertwined, speaking in gentle tones about small dreams and quiet fears. "I sometimes forget how much calmer I feel with you," he said softly. "Even when life gets messy, it's like having you makes it manageable." She squeezed his hand gently. "I feel the same. You make the world feel less heavy, less chaotic. And even when things are hard, I know we can handle them together." They paused near a small bridge overlooking a quiet canal. The water reflected the lights above, rippling with each drop of rain. He looked at her, the soft glow of the streetlights highlighting her face. "I don't want to imagine life without this," he said, his voice low and certain. "You don't have to," she replied, a faint smile touching her lips, "because we have each other. And that's enough." The months that followed were filled with ordinary joys and small triumphs. They discovered new cafes, walked through parks at dawn, and spent long afternoons talking about books, music, and memories from childhood. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. They would simply sit together, the comfort of presence, speaking louder than words ever could. Each quiet moment became a reminder that love didn't need noise or spectacle to exist. It needed patience, attention, and commitment. He noticed the subtle changes in himself. He was calmer, more patient, and more present. He noticed the world around him more, the way sunlight hit the sidewalk, the laughter of children in a nearby park, the scent of flowers in a small garden. These ordinary observations, once ignored, now carried a depth and beauty he hadn't felt in years. She noticed him noticing, and it became part of their shared joy. The mutual appreciation of life in its small details. She, too, changed in quiet ways. She became more open with her feelings, more trusting of the people around her, and more confident in expressing herself. She realized that having someone who truly understood her didn't just bring comfort, it inspired growth. She pursued new hobbies, explored interests she had shelved for years, and approached challenges with a renewed sense of courage. And through it all, he was there. Not as a shadow, not as a guide, but as a partner. A steady presence, a quiet support. Evenings often became their reflection time. They would sit on the balcony, sipping tea or coffee, watching the city lights twinkle as night fell. They spoke about the past, the present, and their hopes for the future. They didn't plan every detail, didn't expect perfection. They simply dreamed together, knowing that even small steps taken in unison could create a meaningful life. There were moments of doubt, of course. No life is without them. Sometimes work pressures or personal worries would intrude, and fears of the future would surface. But each time, they addressed these fears together. They talked openly, sometimes quietly, sometimes with laughter to ease the tension. They learned that vulnerability was not weakness, but strength. That honesty, even when it hurt, was the foundation of lasting connection. One afternoon, they walked through a quiet street lined with autumn trees. The leaves had turned gold and red, falling gently to the ground with each breeze. He stopped and picked up a small, vibrant leaf, holding it out to her. "It's simple," he said, "but it reminds me of us. Ordinary things made beautiful by the right presence." She laughed softly, taking the leaf and tucking it carefully into her scarf. "That's true," she said. "We've learned that beauty isn't in the grand, the dramatic, or the perfect. It's in the small moments, in choosing each other, and in being present." They continued walking, their steps in harmony, their hands loosely intertwined. Every small gesture, every shared glance, every quiet conversation became a thread weaving them closer together. They realized that love didn't need perfection, only effort, care, and patience. As the days turned into seasons, they faced bigger decisions, career moves, family responsibilities, and plans for the future. Each decision was approached as a team. They consulted each other, weighed options together, and supported each other's choices. There was no pressure, no dominance, only partnership. And in that partnership, they found a strength and security neither had known before. One winter evening, with snow beginning to fall softly outside, they sat by the window in the warm glow of their small living room. They watched the flakes drift down, each one unique, each one delicate, yet together, creating a world of quiet beauty. "I love how life feels with you," he said. His voice soft but steady. She smiled, leaning into him. "I love it too. Even when it's hard, even when it's messy, it feels right, because we face it together." They held each other in the quiet of the evening, the snow falling around them, the warmth between them steady and real. They didn't need grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Their love was in the consistency and the care. In the daily choice to be present for each other, months passed and their bond only grew stronger. Friends and family noticed the change in them, the calm strength they carried, the quiet joy that radiated from their shared presence. They became a source of inspiration to those around them, showing that love could be patient, enduring, and deeply human. One evening, they returned to the park where so many memories had been made. The bench where they had shared stories, dreams, and fears was waiting for them. They sat down together, letting the world continue without them for a moment. "I think we've learned something important," he said quietly. "That love isn't about rushing. It isn't about fireworks or grand gestures. It's about showing up every day in ordinary ways that add up to something extraordinary." She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "Yes, love is patience, presence, and care. It's choosing each other even when it's hard, even when it's ordinary. That's what makes it real and lasting." The snow fell gently around them, the city lights reflecting softly in the white blanket forming on the ground. They held hands, feeling the warmth of each other, the security of shared trust, the quiet joy of a love that had been tested, nurtured, and strengthened over time. They didn't know what the future would hold, but they were no longer afraid. They had learned that together they could face anything. They discovered that love is not just a feeling, but a choice, a daily, conscious decision to care, to support, to stay. And that choice, repeated quietly and faithfully, created a life of depth, warmth, and meaning as they walked home that evening, by side, hands intertwined, hearts aligned. They knew one thing clearly. They had found something rare, something beautiful, something enduring. A love that healed, sustained, and inspired. A love that restored faith, not just in each other, but in the very idea that true, quiet human love exists. and can flourish even in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain. They had found it, nurtured it, and chosen it. And in that choice, it found the most extraordinary gift of all, each other. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew and grass. He woke before the sun, as he often did, and found himself thinking about her. It had been years since they first met, years of shared moments, quiet laughter, and mutual support. Yet every day, there was still something new to discover. Some small detail that made his heart tighten in a familiar, gentle way. Love, he realized, was never truly finished. It grew, evolved, and deepened with time, and they were living proof of that. She stirred beside him, stretching gently and letting out a soft yawn. He watched her quietly, marveling at how ordinary actions could feel extraordinary. The simplicity of this moment, a shared bed, the first light filtering through the window, the sound of their breathing in sync felt like the culmination of every choice they had made to stay, to trust, and to care for each other. "I'm awake," she murmured, half smiling, half sleeping. "Good morning," he whispered back, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sleep well." "Better than ever," she replied, finally opening her eyes fully. "I had a dream about the park." He smiled, remembering the countless hours they had spent there. "The bench by the canal?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I remember feeling calm, like everything was exactly where it should be." That feeling had become a quiet theme. In their life, the calm and ordinary moments, the comfort in each other's presence, it wasn't always easy. Life had thrown challenges their way, but the moments of shared joy, quiet understanding, and support had strengthened them. They had learned that love was not about perfection, but about commitment and effort. After breakfast, they decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. The streets were alive with the sounds of morning, children laughing, birds chirping, neighbors greeting each other. They walked side by side, occasionally pointing out small details: a flower growing between the cracks of a sidewalk, a cat curled up on a windowsill, a shop that had recently opened. These were ordinary things, yet when shared, they became moments of connection, small anchors in a life full of movement. "I've been thinking," he said as they walked past a quiet cafe, "about how much has changed since we first met. About how much we've grown together." She glanced at him, curiosity in her eyes. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I mean, I was so focused on my own life, on routines and plans, that I didn't see the beauty in small moments. I didn't realize how much being present with someone could change everything, but you taught me that. You taught me patience, trust, and how to truly care." Her hand found his, fingers entwining naturally. "And you've taught me too," she said softly. "You've shown me that it's okay to lean on someone, to share my fears and dreams without hesitation. We've grown together, and I think that's what makes this love so strong." They continued walking, talking quietly about memories and small victories. She spoke about the little projects she had started, the books she had read, and the songs she had discovered. He shared his own experiences, moments from work, thoughts about the future, and reflections on what they had built together. Every word was deliberate, every pause meaningful, as if they were both aware of the fragility and strength of life at the same time. Later that afternoon, they decided to visit the park where so many significant moments had taken place. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows over the golden grass. Leaves rustled gently in the breeze, and the scent of earth and trees filled the air. They found the bench where they had spent countless hours, and for a moment, neither spoke. The quiet of the space was comforting, reminder of the journey that had brought them here. "I remember sitting here the first time we really talked," she said finally. "I didn't know it then, but I felt like something important was starting." He nodded, smiling. "I felt it too. And I didn't know then how much it would change my life." They sat in silence for a while, watching the world around them. A family played with a small dog nearby, laughter echoing softly. A couple walked hand in hand along the path, their own connection quiet but visible. Observing others, they felt gratitude for the love they shared, knowing that the ordinary moments of life could hold extraordinary meaning. As the evening approached, they decided to go back home. The sky had turned soft shades of pink and purple, the street lights flickering on one by one. Their walk was slow, deliberate, as if they were savoring each moment. Back at home, they settled into their familiar routines. She brewed tea while he organized some papers on the table. They moved around each other effortlessly. The comfort of shared space evident in the small gestures, a hand brushing against the other. A shared smile, a gentle word of encouragement. Over tea, they spoke about plans for the upcoming months, small trips, visits to friends and family, and personal goals they wanted to pursue. They didn't make grand declarations, didn't plan every detail. They knew life was unpredictable, but they also knew they would face it together, with patience, care, and trust. Later, as night fell, they sat by the window, watching the stars begin to appear in the sky. The city lights reflected in the glass, blending with the distant glow of the moon. They didn't speak much, simply holding hands and appreciating the quiet of the night. Sometimes, silence was enough. Sometimes, it said more than words ever could. He thought about all they had been through, the initial meeting, the small moments that became memories, the distance and fear that had tested them, and the steady growth of trust and understanding. Each experience had shaped their relationship, teaching them patience, resilience, and the power of showing up for each other. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he rested his cheek on her hair. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked softly. "All the time," he replied, "and it amazes me. We've faced challenges, changes, and fears, and yet here we are, stronger, closer, and more certain than ever." Their life had settled into a rhythm that was neither hurried nor stagnant. Every day brought small challenges and small joys. Sometimes work was demanding, sometimes health concerns arose, sometimes friends or family needed support. Yet, they faced each situation together. They had learned that love wasn't about escaping difficulty. It was about walking through it side by side. Over the next few weeks, they continued to nurture their bond. They explored new parts of the city, tried new hobbies together, occasionally spent quiet evenings at home, reading or listening to music. Each moment was a choice to be present, to care, and to invest in the life they were building together. One afternoon, as they walked along a familiar street, they stumbled upon a small art exhibition. The paintings were simple, yet filled with emotion. They moved from piece to piece, commenting softly on colors, shapes, and the feelings evoked. It was an ordinary day, yet it felt extraordinary because they shared it. "I love that we can find beauty in ordinary things," she said, gazing at a painting of a quiet river at sunset. He nodded. "It's because we notice together. We share the small moments, and they become bigger than they are." They left the exhibition hand in hand, their conversation drifting to dreams for the future. They spoke about traveling to new places, learning new skills, and building a life that balanced work, love, and personal growth. Each idea was discussed, gently, without pressure, knowing that life would shape the details, and that they would face whatever came together. As autumn gave way to winter, the first snow fell softly. They walked through the city's streets, marveling at the quiet beauty of white flakes settling on the ground. Children played nearby, and the cold air carried laughter and joy. They held hands, feeling the warmth of each other in contrast to the chill around them. That evening, back at home, they made a simple dinner together. The warmth of the kitchen, the scent of cooking, and the gentle banter made even the simplest task feel meaningful. They laughed when something spilled, joked about who had stirred too quickly, and cleaned together. The ordinary tasks of life became moments of intimacy, proof that love thrived not just in grand gestures, but in shared routines and mutual care. Later, they sat by the window, sipping hot chocolate, watching the snow blanket the city, the quiet of the night, the gentle sound of falling snow. And the presence of each other created a feeling of profound peace. "I've realized something," he said quietly. "Love isn't just about the big moments. It's about these small ones, the walks, the meals, the quiet evenings. They're what make life beautiful." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Exactly. It's the everyday choices, the patience, the care, and the presence. That's what builds something lasting. Over time, they continued to grow together, learning more about themselves and each other. They celebrated successes, faced setbacks, and embraced every ordinary day with gratitude. Each challenge was met with trust, each joy shared fully, and each quiet moment treasured deeply. They had discovered that love was not a fleeting emotion, but a series of choices. Choices to show up, to listen, to care, and to remain patient. They had learned that happiness was found not in perfection, but in shared presence, mutual understanding, and unwavering support. One evening, as the city lights reflected on wet streets after a gentle rain, they walked together in silence. The comfort of being side by side, the warmth of hands entwined, and the quiet strength of their bond made the world feel right. They didn't need to speak. The years of shared experience had built a language of its own. "I'm glad we chose each other," he said softly. "Me too," she replied. "Every day, I'm glad we stayed, we trusted, and we cared." And in that moment, as they continued their walk, they knew that their love was not just a feeling or a story, it was a living, breathing reality. A love built on patience, honesty, and quiet devotion. A love that could withstand challenges, grow through ordinary moments, and flourish over time. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they were no longer afraid. They had found something rare, something real, and something worth nurturing for a lifetime. And in choosing each other every day, they had discovered the true meaning of love, not loud or dramatic, but steady, enduring, and profoundly human.